With the New York Times in one hand and the Catechism of the Catholic Church in the other, Al Kresta is ready for conversations of consequence.
We do not train to be merciful here. Mercy is for the weak.
Pope Francis has declared the year of mercy.
The message of divine mercy is the heart of the gospel.
You said it very well.
ISIS claims they have more terrorists in America.
What you talking about, Willis?
This is not a time to be afraid, though.
If God be for us, who can be against us?
Nobody! Broadcasting from the studios of Ave Maria Radio in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and taking a closer Catholic look at current events, issues, and ideas. This is Kresta in the Afternoon.
What you do is so critically important. That's a great analysis.
You nailed it.
The force is strong in this one.
It's showtime.
Well, let's start the insanity.
You have proved yourself worthy. Will you join me? Who's with me? Let's go!
And good afternoon to you. I'm Al Kresta. It's good to be here. And our number is 1-877-573-7825. That's 1-877-573-7825. Direct to my desk, you get a chance to set the agenda. The Catholic Church, let me put this conversation about identity politics within a Catholic context. Jesus came in order to create humanity anew. Right? He becomes the last Adam. God is redeeming the human race, the race that He created. In other words, He had a plan for the human race, and that plan was that we would begin in a garden and end in a city, so to speak. There'd be development. Over a long period of time, there'd be cultural development. We would populate. We would be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth. And there would be doing what we call works of culture, the works of our hands. Adam had a task from the garden. Eve had a task in the garden. And the idea was that as we walked in fidelity to God's law, to His word, to His instruction and His guidance, as we walked in obedience and harmony, in wisdom, the human race itself would walk together. There would be a unity. This is why there's such emphasis on love God, love neighbor. The problem is there was the fall. There was that great rupture at the beginning of human experience where our first parents deliberately violated the divine plan. And with that, relationships ruptured. Adam and Eve blamed each other. There was a rupture in the relationship with God, of course. We began to experience guilt within ourselves. We even had problems with nature. Adam would work the soil, and he'd get thorns and thistles. So his labor was frustrated and thwarted. And there was the great sociological breakdown. We see it in the Tower of Babel, for instance. And Christ comes in order to restore the human race to its original divinely intended unity. This is why St. Paul spends just about every letter talking about the visible unity of the church. The church is the pilot plant of the new humanity. The Catholic Church is supposed to be a model of what it means for every nation, every race, every kindred, every tribe, every tongue, being able to worship together at the Lord's table. You can find this emphasis through the history of Israel, where they have the one temple, the one altar, and then, of course, there's a breakdown between Israel and Judah. They have a northern kingdom, a southern kingdom, and they go into captivity. Again, the sin of division almost always produces captivity. So this is not a small emphasis in Scripture, and it's not a small emphasis in Catholic social teaching. So Catholics who ignore this idea of identity politics or ignore historic acts of prejudice and bias against people groups are making a big mistake. When you ignore this, you're actually giving away one of the great benefits that the Catholic Church offers people, which is reconciliation and healing. So when we begin to talk about questions of race, the social background of race, persistence of race questions or sexism or Islamophobia, these are not small matters. Conservative politics talks about it, but they don't have much of a solution for it. The Catholic Church has a solution for it because Jesus has the solution for it. And that's where we operate from, all right? That's where we try to bring everything back. I want to make that clear. So, for instance, we talked about hate crimes. I don't like groups like the Southern Poverty Law Center. I don't trust them. They derive their money by trying to exaggerate right-wing hate groups in America. I've watched them for 30 years, and I find them to be unreliable. I rely upon the FBI statistics. Not perfect, but you've got to have some group that you can watch over the years. Now, in 2015, they've just released some numbers on hate crimes in 2015. There are almost 6,000 single bias incidents in 2015. 6,000 of them. That comes down to about 15 a day. In a nation of 300 million people, there were 15 hate crimes a day. Now put that up against other crimes that are committed and ask yourself if this is really what's poisoning America. All right? Let's go to the news headlines and then we'll come back. Good afternoon, I'm Al Kresta. We'll continue with your calls on this Direct to My Desk segment. I mentioned earlier the extraordinary arrogance of the cast of Hamilton, the musical on Broadway. After the election, lead producer Jeffrey Seller told the New York Times, quote, "We had to ask ourselves, how do we cope with this? Our cast could barely go on stage the day after the election." Let me tell you how you cope with that. You get some Republicans in the cast. I mean, if your cast was so thoroughly appalled by the election, it tells me you don't have a very diverse cast. That's what it tells me. And so the cast, so that Mike Pence and his family was there leaving the theater after the curtain call, and the actor who played Aaron Burr, who has very strange history on Twitter, by the way, asked the audience to get out their smartphones and start filming. All right. And then he knew right away what was going on here. He knew, as their ad hoc spokesman, that there was going to be no debate. There's not going to be an opportunity for Mr. Pence or anyone else to reply because he was the guy holding the microphone. And two, it was going to draw more attention to the show itself, which, of course, is a commercial concern. And so he thought he had nothing to lose on this. This is what he said. "We, sir, we are the diverse America who are alarmed and anxious that your new administration will not protect us, our planet, our children, our parents, or defend us and uphold our inalienable rights. We truly hope that this show has inspired you to uphold our American values and to work on behalf of all of us." And then he went on to add sexual orientation to this list. Okay. Now, Pence handled it real well. Eventually, he came out and said, "This is what freedom sounds like." Nicely done. But I want you to understand something here. We didn't see this happen when Bill Clinton beat George H.W. Bush, and conservatives were shocked. We didn't see it when President Obama beat Mitt Romney or John McCain. We didn't see conservatives crying or calling for safe zones or afraid that they were going to be losing their religious liberty. If Mrs. Clinton had won, you wouldn't have seen conservatives running around. They would have been upset, but you wouldn't have seen them on college campuses asking for cry-ins, right? Look, if Pence had called the cast of Hamilton out in the way that the cast called him out, he would have been accused of being abusive. What's abusive is for these actors to exploit the audience who paid lots of money, to perhaps escape the world or, get out of the whole discussion of politics. They want to go see a play. And now they find themselves captive to a cast that's supposed to be respecting their audience. This is what they did wrong. They didn't respect their audience. They used their audience. They patronized their audience to make a cheap political point and do a little bit of political theater. Their producer doesn't pay them to do this. The audience didn't pay them to do this. Apparently, they can't command a political audience anywhere unless they fool people into coming to a play. Look, nearly half the American voters voted for Trump-Pence, and they're seated in the audience there. So again, this shows a complete lack of respect for one's own audience. And it also shows extraordinary insularity and parochialism. Yeah, I wish somebody had stood up that night and said to this guy who was playing Burr, buddy, what is diversity? Do you think it's difficult to accept a person with different DNA or skin color or a different land of origin? That's nothing. That's easy. Diversity is about accepting those with whom you profoundly disagree. Jesus talked about diversity in its most extreme form when he said, love your enemies. So here you are holding your audience captive, giving a political speech, trying to embarrass the vice president-elect, and you're not even loving your friends here. You're indulging your own political passions. And the irony is, sir, that you get away with it because your cast is not diverse. I bet none of your cast voted Republican, if they voted at all. You boast diversity, and then you make sure that your tribe doesn't show any. You're the one who's parochial. You're the one who's uncomfortable with diverse opinions. You've so poisoned your own imagination that you confuse the duly elected governor of Indiana and now the duly elected vice president. You confuse him with political interlopers and tyrants. That isn't what we've got. Mike Pence is no tyrant. He's a conservative. Half the American people voted for him. So get over it. You know, you want to believe that those with whom you disagree are secretly slave owners or anti-Semites. That's not true. They are those who, advocate limited government, want lower taxes, are pro-life. They want to end the sham political correctness and this political discourse that boasts that you, sir, you're taking the high moral ground when all you're doing is increasing polarization and hate by refusing to understand the other side in this political debate. So stop being silly. Stop making a fool of yourself and get back to do what you're good at. You're an actor. Go play the minstrel. That's your profession. Do it well. Shut up and sing. That's what you were paid to do. That's what should have happened. Because this is the poison that is out there against conservatives, evangelical Protestants, conservative Catholics. We have been victimized by a false narrative about American political history. And Catholic apologists know this because they see it when it comes to Catholic history, the way it's twisted. And now is a good time for us to say, we're just going to, you were rude, young man, you were rude. And I'm going to keep saying that you're rude. That's all. You want to be rude? You want us to know you're rude? Keep talking. Good afternoon, I'm Al Kresta. We continue with your calls, 1-877-573-7825. To New York we go. Lori, you're up.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. Let's talk.
I want to know why you were standing behind me in the office that I was in, because you had to have been hiding behind the door. I had a conversation with a colleague about 3 hours ago. Mm-hmm. That included all of the things that you were just talking about. Mm-hmm. And the twisting of the messages and the focus on things that were really irrelevant, simply to get a rise. And she bought into all of it. She was, he's going to do this and he's going to do that and he's going to... Mm-hmm. She didn't say deport everybody, but there's kind of the way she was leaning was, he's only going to let people like him in. I don't really see it going that way. And
it's silly. Unfortunately, he talks, his type of discourse plays right into the fears of those people, but those fears are largely self-generated.
Exactly.
We've had the fixation on this ideological diversity in our schools and in the press has produced a generation of so-called progressives that are narcissistically unaware of conditions outside of their own self-contained groups. They're indifferent to the task of other Americans. They don't understand that Americans disagree amongst themselves. That cast for Hamilton that lectured the vice president the other night talked about, Mr. President, look up here. This is how you see diversity. I bet you there wasn't a single Republican on the stage.
Oh, I would guarantee.
When they talk diversity, they're talking about DNA.
Their kind of diversity.
Yeah, they're talking about skin color. They're talking about sexual orientation. They aren't talking about the hard diversity. Hard diversity means accepting those with whom you profoundly disagree. And, of course, Jesus did this to the uttermost when he told us to love our enemies. People who practice the Catholic faith learn real diversity because we learn how to pray for and love even our enemies with whom we profoundly disagree. It's not about skin color, although the Catholic Church is big on that. We believe that every nation, kindred, and tongue, all the baptized, no matter what skin color they are, no matter what class they are to be united in Christ. The Catholic Church is about diversity, but it's not the kind of diversity that this actor on Broadway was talking about when he was chiding Vice President Pence.
Exactly. And they want us to be offended because in their minds he's so narrow-minded, whereas the only difference is they're narrow-minded in a different direction. Yeah. And I have to tell you, I was far less offended by his sexist comments, even as a woman who has been a victim in the past. I still was less offended by that than I was by being tossed into a bucket of deplorables or whatever it was that I so much would rather, because I can easily shut somebody down who is going to make sexist comments or whatever to me. But I can't easily get my religious freedoms back when the government has decided to shut those off.
Yes. Those remarks from Mr. Trump showed that he was a cad. We've seen cads before. We know how to deal with them. When she called half the American people, or half of his supporters, deplorables, she was expressing a degree of arrogance I've never seen before in a political candidate. You don't say that kind of thing about your opponent's supporters.
Not if you're trying to get them to see your side.
Exactly. You don't write them off.
Right. And this person that I was talking to earlier today, and she was talking about how she blames the media for Trump winning. I said, you know what, though? The media kept showing his outlandish behaviors, not even his more restrained behaviors, just his outlandish ones, in an effort to get Hillary elected. Yeah. What they failed to calculate for was that what her reactions were doing were alienating half of us, and what his behaviors were doing were emphasizing to the country that, yes, we do need something different, and, well, I don't know that we could have come up with anything more different than the status quo than him. So
we'll see.
The media has nobody to blame but themselves for playing the game that they wanted to play.
Yeah. No, I agree. What they're about is they're about arresting people's attention with the odd, and Mr. Trump did a lot of odd things, and so he got a lot of free publicity, and, that's the way it is. They liked to show it. They thought that he would dig his own grave. They thought that, listeners to this program know that I've been very critical of Trump. My criticism of Donald Trump was never, however, implicit support for Hillary Clinton. We have a president that we're going to have to criticize in the future. I mean, he ended up claiming he was going to prosecute Hillary Clinton, get an independent prosecutor. He was going to throw her in jail, and now Kellyanne Conway comes out and says they're not going to do that. Well, that's hypocritical on his part. Nevertheless, move on. I'm not going to. Right. I just think we should. What I'm saying is we ought to be mature enough to criticize the guy we may have voted for, because you don't know what he's going to do a year from now. And especially Catholics ought to always keep their distance from Caesar. Even if they think Caesar for this season is handling things pretty well, keep your distance, because you never know when Caesar's going to turn on you. So right. I appreciate the call, Larry. Thanks. Good afternoon. I'm Al Kresta. We call these kind of segments direct to my desk, and I do appreciate the calls. I do appreciate the calls, too, that disagree. That's good. So just let you know, I don't consider that a bad thing. I consider it one of the values of doing programming like this. Well, just another thing came in over my desk here on Facebook. It says, I know, for instance, from Carolyn, I know a man who teaches inner-city teens an art class after school. He wrote that his kids were afraid to go to class and were wondering why everyone hated them. Well, Carolyn wonders, who told these teens that they were hated? A Planned Parenthood mom said she felt so bad to hear her daughter crying. Why should a preteen cry at the outcome of an election unless people have given her reason to fear? The left is very good at this kind of deception, and far better than conservatives, who tend to be governed a little bit by a confidence in the moral law. I wish we had more time to unpack this, but it was good conversation. And again, full agreement. It's not necessary. That's not on doctrine. Yes, the Catholic Church teaches what it teaches, but on these kind of prudential questions where we're trying to analyze what's going on, we don't have to have full agreement. What we have to have is full respect, and as we try to figure out exactly what we're dealing with. But the Trinity, the Eucharist, the divinity of Jesus. Well, no, those things are settled. But exactly how best to present a Catholic worldview in this America of 2016, there are a lot of unanswered questions, a lot of things we have to fight through together. So thanks very much. Good being with you, and have a wonderful Thanksgiving. I'm Al Kresta. Follow up at AveMariaRadio.net.
Kresta in the Afternoon is a co-production of Ave Maria Radio and EWTN Radio, and carried across the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. The executive producer is Nick Tom. To follow up on any of the guests or information presented on today's program, visit the Kresta Guest Archive at AveMariaRadio.net. That's AVEMARIA Radio.net. To listen to this or any other edition of Kresta in the Afternoon, visit the audio archives at AveMariaRadio.net. Or to order a CD of the program, call 734-930-4506 or email orders at AveMariaRadio.net. That's 734-930-4506 or orders at AveMariaRadio.net.